Hey there, church family. Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. For those of you who are new to Family Christian Center, my name's Seth, and I'm the media director here at the church. And this morning, I'm excited because I'm going to be sharing with you for your morning podcast devotional. And one of the areas that God has been challenging me on recently has been in the area of trust and full surrender. And I've said this before, but I'm the type of person that often struggles with control. And you might be like me in this. Like, you might love to make plans. You might love to set goals and to be able to make these things happen. But sometimes it can be difficult when things don't go the way that we might have thought they would, right? And I think for a lot of us, this year in general, 2020, has probably not gone the way we would have expected to. But we try so hard to keep this tight grip of control over our lives. As Christians, I feel like this is something that we sometimes struggle with. And I feel like most of us, we're okay at surrendering certain aspects and areas of our life to God. But then when it comes to other things, sometimes we struggle more. And an area that God has been challenging me personally in has just been in the area of finances. As Christians, most of us are content giving God the 10%, right? We're content tithing. But what happens if God asks for more? And this is something He's been challenging me in. I'm content with that tithe, but if God asks for full control over my finances, I don't know how I would respond. And I think we all have these areas that God has been challenging us in to fully surrender. And I think He's asking all of us this question today. He's asking us, do we fully trust Him? And are we willing to lay down control over every aspect and area of our life? And there's a story in the Old Testament that has really been just challenging me in this area. And I'd love to be able to share it with you today. And this is the story of Gideon. I'll just give you a quick summary of the story if you're not familiar with it. But it took place in the Old Testament, and it took place in a time when the Israelites had turned away from God. And, they started doing things that were just really evil in God's sight. And they were worshiping other gods. They actually had an idol of Baal. And as a result of these things, they had found themselves being oppressed by the Midianites. And these were people who lived nearby. But what was happening was, the Israelites, Israel, they worked so hard being able to grow food and crops for their family, to be able to put food on the table. But then the Midianites would come by, and they'd just sweep in, and they would steal, they would destroy. And they were just making the lives of the Israelites really terrible. But eventually God chose a man named Gideon to be able to save the Israelites from the Midianites. And this is what happened. Gideon was actually a lot like you and me. And he seems to be a little bit of a control freak, and he had trouble trusting God. But God Himself appears before Gideon in the form of an angel, and He says to Gideon, Gideon, you're going to be the person that I use to deliver Israel from the Midianites. And He says that to Gideon. And I don't know about you, but if God said that to me, I think I would be a little bit shocked, maybe a little bit scared, a little concerned. And we see that Gideon actually responded in a pretty similar way. In Gideon, he struggled to trust God. And as a result of these things, he kept on asking God for proof after proof, for sign after sign, just asking God to just prove it to him that he was the man for the job. But the crazy thing is, God actually gave him these signs. And we're not going to go into detail on these things. But eventually Gideon, he finds himself in charge of an army of 32,000 men. And they're on their way to be able to fight the Midianites. And here's where the story gets really interesting. They're on their way, and Gideon's probably thinking, I got 32,000 men. This is a pretty good-sized army, we might have an actual chance at this. But then God stops Gideon, and He says to him, you have too many men, for I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me, saying, my own strength has saved me. So what God does is God tells Gideon to send 22,000 of the men home. And Gideon does it. It's crazy because what happens is God knew that if Gideon won the battle with his 32,000 men, they would have all thought that they had won under their own strength. And God wanted to receive glory and honor through this whole thing. So He began to strip away the things that Gideon was leaning upon. And He sent 32,000 of the men home. And at this point, I think Gideon's probably getting a little bit nervous. But they continue on. But God stops them just a little bit later, and He says, no, Gideon, you have still too many men. And God left Midian with 300 men to be able to fight that battle. And we all know how the story ends. God gave them victory. And Gideon and his men actually didn't have to do very much to be able to win that battle. God actually turned the Midianites against each other. And the Midianites ended up killing each other. So Gideon didn't have to do very much. But they had victory in the situation. And it's a crazy story. But there's something that I want to leave you with today. And it's this, is that it is impossible to fully trust God unless we're willing to lay down all levels of control in our life. For Gideon, he would have really wanted to be able to fight that battle under his own strength. He would have wanted to lean upon his army, right? But God knew that God wouldn't be able to demonstrate his power through the situation unless he first stripped Gideon of all of his securities. As Christians, I think this is what God wants to do with us. God wants us to be willing to lay down all of those areas in our life that we put our trust in that are outside of him. God is a jealous God, and he wants to be our primary and only source of strength. And he desires to be able to demonstrate his power and glory through us. So I ask you today, what are those areas in your life that you lean upon? What are those areas and those securities in your life that are outside of God? Maybe for you this is your job, or maybe it's your career. Maybe you just continue to put your trust in your own abilities instead of trusting fully in God. And as we near the end of this year, as we enter into 2021, I just want to encourage you guys. So let's make this as a year that we can fully surrender every area of our lives to God. Because it's through doing that we're going to be able to see God's glory revealed through our lives. I hope you guys are blessed today. I hope that you can experience God's peace in everything that you do. And God bless.